Today I want to delve a little bit deeper into compression ratios. So I want to sometimes we get confused about some of the parameters. Well, sometimes I get confused about some of the parameters in compression. But today I want to focus on just the ratio parameter. I'm going to use a song by my friend Cozy. His group is We Are Remix. Now, there's different ways to think about what ratio does. One of the ways I like to think about it is I've got a ceiling, and this ceiling is imaginary. That ceiling sound is trying to bump up against this ceiling. Now, they can go past the ceiling. Now, the ceiling represents, in my mind, the threshold setting on a compressor. Now, not all compressors have a threshold setting. Well, that's another subject. Now, what ratio does is if I've got a sound and I set my ratio of 2 to 1, for every 2 dB above threshold, the ratio says bring it down 1. So if I go 8 dB above threshold, it brings it down to 4 dB. So you can see if I increase the ratio, like say to 16 to 1, every time I go 16 dB above threshold, it would bring it down to 1, or 32 would bring it down to 2. So lower thresholds allow lower ratios allow. So a lower ratio allows more dynamics to take place above threshold. I guess you should say it allows more dynamics to take place, period. So in my mind, I think sometimes lower ratios crank down the threshold, so I get more happening above the threshold, but at a lower ratio. Sometimes I like that combination on stereo buses. Sometimes on basses I might use a more drastic ratio, like 8 to 1, 12 to 1. And I'm going to show you today on a vocal what happens with a couple of different thresholds, a couple of different ratios in terms of the feel and what we're trying to do. So if we're trying to keep something within a certain dynamic range, as the ratio gets higher and higher, we go into what's called limiting. So a limiter technically is a compressor with a very high ratio. General consensus somewhere around a 50 to 1 ratio, you start limiting. And then what we call a brick wall limiter is nothing gets above threshold. There's a brick ceiling on that threshold, so the ratio, I guess, could be infinity to 1. So, or did I say it backwards? 1 to infinity? Anyway, look it up. You guys got to do some work yourselves too. So let me play this example and show you something. While this is loading up, I want you to notice on the screen this little chart. Now this is what happens on the classic DBX 160 XT compressor. I was wondering, why is it that I can't get my plugins to sound like it? Now this is interesting because the attack time is program dependent. So depending on how many dB I'm knocking off, the attack time changes. The release time is program dependent. Copy this, because these will allow you to get some really cool drum compressor sounds, because the DBX 160X is thought of as, by me anyway, is thought of as a great drum compressor. Now here's a basic compressor. I'm using a little slower attack time. We've got a ratio of around 2 to 1. Release, I'd say a little bit on the longer side. And we're going to set the threshold to just knock off a couple of dB. Let's check it out.
When you see me coming alive, when you see me coming alive, when you see me come.
Now what you heard was the word when has to have that attack on it, and if we smooth that word out, we lose a little bit of the energy. And then UC is kind of tucked in a little, and then coming alive is another important energy word. So I'm using a 2 to 1 ratio, so focus on the emotion and feeling we're feeling in that 2 to 1 ratio.
When you see me coming alive, when you see me coming alive.
Now Now let me take the compressor off and focus on the same concept.
When you see me coming alive, when you see me coming alive, when you see me coming alive, when you see me coming alive.
I think it must have gotten a tiny bit louder, but you guys are sophisticated. You can substitute in your head for that little extra volume. So what I'm hearing on the compressed version is the wind came down, coming came down, and it came to a closer level to the other words, and now we turn the wind and the coming back up to the original level where they were, and now we've brought with those words the level of the other words. So we tried to keep the dynamics and the importance of that energy in those two words, wind and coming, but we've gotten the other words up to start contributing a little bit to the energy too. Now, as we increase the ratio, we get them all more even, but when they're even, there's nothing to impart that energy. That dynamic range contains the energy. So let's see if we can hear when we lose that.
When you see me coming alive, when you see me.
Okay, focus on this number right here, this ratio number.
When you see me coming alive, 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 when you see me coming alive.
Did you feel the energy kind of go away? If you didn't, don't worry. You know, some of these things take a minute to hear. Just play that reference over and over again and really train your ear to focus on the energy and the emotion in that line. There's a little tiny, it's not a crack in his voice, but it's a little tiny Michael Jackson little thing that's going on there, so we don't want to destroy that. There's a lot of some there, so we don't want to destroy. It might take you a couple of tries to hear it, but don't get discouraged. You can hear it, but more importantly, you want to feel it. I get asked a lot, should I put my equalizer in front of the compressor or after the compressor? The basic rule of thumb is, if you've got a frequency that's causing the compressor to do things you don't like, then put an EQ in front of the compressor and take that frequency out. For example, in a vocal, if you've got a lot of low-end muddiness actually affecting what your compressor is doing, put something in front of the compressor, roll that out. It might be a little bit too much 2K. Roll that out, and now your compressor is acting to different frequencies. You might ask, well, Dave, what's the difference between that and side chaining? Well, side chaining, we're concerned with the compression of certain frequencies. Here, we don't want certain frequencies to affect the compression. And if you put the equalizer after the compressor, what you're doing, obviously, is EQing the compressed signal. When would you do that? Sometimes with some attack times, you might take too much low end out of your kick drum. I tend to keep the attack times on my kick drums a little on the high side, 30 to 50, somewhere in there, and that gives me a little bit more low end. And if you've taken off a little bit of low end from the compressor of the kick drum, but adding a little bit of the attack by doing that, then you might want to add a little bit of low end back into the compressor. On some of the side chain stuff I've shown you, the side chain track, I compress the snot out of the drum, and if on a kick I lose so much low end, I'll take an API 550 or a Pultec, and I'll drop that in after the compressor and add those low frequencies back. Always remember, compression can add to the experience of a particular track and a body of music, or it can really take away from it. You're squeezing more into a smaller space, which can be a good thing, but you're also squeezing more energy into a smaller space, and nothing's jumping out at you. So play around with it. For some of you, this is going to come really quick and easy, and some of you, it's going to be a little harder to hear. Me personally, compression was the last thing I really felt like I nailed in terms of my growth. So don't get discouraged. Experiment, experiment, experiment. You've got so many options now in your DAW that you can really use presets, see what other people are doing, and let me know how you're doing. Okay? All right.